I was 76 years old the morning I realized my own son had taken control of my life without ever looking me in the eye. You know, people talk about getting old like it's just creaky knees and forgetting where you left the damn remote. But nobody warns you about the way paperwork, simple signatures, can be used to hollow out a man's entire world. That October morning in 2021, sitting at my kitchen table in Tacoma with the rain tapping the window, I learned I was legally powerless in my own home. It started with a letter from Columbia Federal Credit Union, a plain white envelope, nothing special. I slid it open with my old pocket knife, the one my father gave me in '63, and I remember the metallic smell of the blade mixing with the scent of burnt Folgers on the counter. The letter said a change had been made to my account holder permissions. My son, David, had been added as full controller under a durable power of attorney. Full control, transactions, withdrawal, changes to beneficiaries. Everything. My name was still on the account, sure, but on paper David owned my life. Legally, officially, quietly. I must have read that line 8 times, my hands shaking so bad the paper rustled like dry leaves. I called the number on the back of the letter. "Sir, the document was signed and notarized," the woman told me, calm, rehearsed, like she'd had this conversation before. "No, ma'am. No, I didn't sign any power of attorney." There was a pause on the line, not dramatic, not movie style, just a small, polite silence. "Well, according to our files, you did." I felt something inside me shift, like a floorboard giving way. If you've ever been truly blindsided by family, you know that feeling. It isn't anger first. It's disbelief's ugly little cousin, humiliation. The thought that maybe you missed something, maybe you were stupid, maybe you were slipping. I hung up without saying goodbye, which isn't like me, and stared at the rain hitting the driveway. And you know what I thought? Maybe David had a good reason. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe nothing was wrong. That's what shame does to an old man. Makes him doubt what he knows damn well is the truth. About an hour later, I dialed David. "Dad," he answered, his voice a little too bright. "Everything okay?" "You want to tell me why a credit union thinks you're in charge of my accounts?" I asked. There was a long exhale, then a careful tone, one I'd heard him use on his kids when they'd spilled milk and he wanted to keep the peace. "Dad, we talked about this." "No," I said, "we didn't." "We did back in July. You said you were having trouble keeping everything straight. You asked me to help." "I asked you to help pay the property taxes," I snapped, "not take over my whole life." His voice dropped an octave. "Dad, don't start. You're forgetting things. This is for your own good." You know how a man can feel his blood warm, like it's slowly climbing out of his chest and into his throat? That was me, standing dead still in my own kitchen while my son gaslit me through a cell phone tower. "I'm not forgetting a damn thing," I said. "Dad, I'm just trying to protect you. You don't understand the paperwork anymore." There it was, the line calm, reasonable, deadly. And with it, the real fear hit me like a brick to the ribs. What if he genuinely believed he could steamroll me? What if he thought I was too old to push back? What if this was just the beginning? I hung up before I said something I'd regret, though in hindsight, maybe I should have said it. The next day, the first withdrawal hit, $12,500. $2 days later, $8,000. Then $4,300. The amounts were specific, deliberate, not frantic theft, measured extraction, like siphoning fuel from a tank. My tank. My retirement. My life's work. That Sunday, I sat alone in the pews at St. Mark's on South 11th Street, listening to Pastor Higgins talk about forgiveness. I wasn't hearing a word of it. My fingers traced the ridges of the wooden bench, and I felt small. Smaller than I'd felt since Vietnam, and that was a long damn time ago. When service ended, Higgins put a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Everything all right, Jim?" I lied, "Just tired." But inside, something ugly had started to grow. Not revenge, not yet. More like a stubborn spark of survival. A whisper saying, "You are not done. Don't let him take this from you." That night, lying awake in my quiet house on Proctor Street while the furnace hummed, I made myself a promise. If David thought age made me weak, he had no idea who he was dealing with. Because I wasn't giving him a damn inch. Not my money. Not my dignity. Not my life. And when I fought back, when I truly started fighting, he never saw it coming. I'll tell you something you might not expect. Before all this happened, I would have told anyone who asked that my son David was a good man. Maybe not perfect, nobody is, but decent. A hard worker. A father trying to do right by his kids. Growing up in Tacoma, he'd always been the quieter of my two boys, the one who preferred sitting at the kitchen table building model airplanes instead of running around outside getting his knees scraped up like his brother Michael. Back then when David was little, he'd sit on my lap while I watched Seahawks games, asking a million questions about every single play. Why did they run left, Dad? Why didn't he throw it? Why'd the ref do that? That boy wanted to understand everything. He had that kind of sharp, focused mind that could take things apart and never lose a single screw. And I'll admit to you, because you're the only one I've ever said this to, I had a soft spot for him. Michael was always loud, always charging ahead, but David, he was different, thoughtful, careful, sensitive. Maybe that's why I kept making excuses for him long after I shouldn't have. Before the betrayal, my life was simple, predictable. Some people dread that kind of routine. I found comfort in it. I lived in the same split-level home on Proctor Street that my late wife, Elaine, and I bought in '79. Beige siding, green trim, big maple in the front yard that dropped leaves like it was in some kind of competition with the neighbors' trees. Every morning I woke up at 6:30, stretched out my stiff back, and shuffled into the kitchen to put on a pot of Folgers. Set out 2 slices of wheat toast, turned on KOMO News. I'd read the obituaries first, habit from my father, then the sports section. Tuesdays, I went down to the Veterans Hall on Mildred Street, played cribbage with my buddy Leonard. Fridays, I drove my old '98 Ford F-150 down to the Ace Hardware on South 38th just to wander the aisles. I didn't always need something. I just liked being around the smell of lumber, you know. Reminded me of when I used to build backyard decks for neighbors back in the '90s to keep busy after retirement. There was peace in my life, a rhythm. And back then, even David was part of that rhythm, calling once a week, checking in, sometimes bringing the kids over on Sundays if his wife had the day off. I made pancakes shaped like Mickey Mouse for the grandkids, even though my arthritis made holding the spatula harder than I like to admit. The cracks didn't start with shouting or money or legal papers. They started quietly, almost politely, if you can believe that. David would say things like, "Dad, maybe I should help you organize those tax documents," or, "Hey, you sure you want to handle the insurance stuff alone?" At the time, it felt like kindness. I remember the first moment I sensed something was off, even though I pushed the thought away. It was early June, 4 months before the letter from the credit union. David came over to help me trim the branches on that damn maple tree. We were out there in the yard, sweat on our brows even though the air was cool, branches piling up in a heap. We were taking a break when he glanced at the house and said, "You know, Dad, you really ought to think about simplifying things. That house is a lot to manage now." I frowned. I've been managing it for 40 years. He wiped his forehead with his sleeve. "Sure, but you're getting older." "Everyone is." I tried to laugh, make it light. He didn't laugh back. "I'm serious. We should talk about planning, legal stuff, protective measures, things like that." Something in my gut twisted when he said it. Not enough to set off alarm bells. More like a faint warning, like the smell before a storm. I shook my head. "Let's focus on the branches." He didn't push it, not then. But I remember the look he gave me. Concern on the surface, something else underneath. Late that night, after a hot shower eased the ache in my shoulders, I sat in my recliner and thought about his tone. The way he said, "We should talk about planning." The way he looked at my house like it was some kind of burden he would eventually need to inherit rather than a home filled with memories of his mother. But I brushed it off. Tell yourself a lie long enough, you'll start calling it the truth. And I told myself David was just worried, just being responsible, just being the son I raised. The before picture of all this, the calm life I had, the faith I had in my own son, makes what happened next cut deeper than anything I'd felt since Elaine passed. Back then, I still believed in him, truly believed. If I'd known where things were headed, hell, I might have paid a little closer attention to the way he insisted on helping with small things, because every one of those moments was a breadcrumb, a sign of what he was already planning behind my back. But I didn't see it yet. Or maybe I refused to. And that was my mistake. You know, looking back now, the first real fracture didn't arrive with some dramatic betrayal or shouting match. It came quietly, like a draft slipping under the front door. You only notice it once the whole damn room is cold. That summer of 2021, Tacoma had one of those July heat waves where even the shade feels like someone's holding a blow dryer to your face. I remember sitting in my living room, ceiling fan on full blast, glass of iced tea sweating on the coffee table. I'd been going through some old VA papers, renewal forms for my prescription coverage, when I noticed the pages I'd set aside were no longer where I left them. At first, I thought maybe I'd misplaced them. Happens. My memory wasn't what it was when I was roofing houses in the early 90s, climbing up and down ladders like a man half my age. So I searched the kitchen, the dining room, even the laundry room. Nothing. Later that evening, I found the papers in a neat stack on the arm of the couch, with a sticky note on top that read, "Dad, you can't keep losing things like this. Let me help." D. The handwriting hit me like a fist to the gut. I hadn't lost anything. I hadn't moved anything. And the note wasn't kind, it was a warning. A suggestion that I was slipping. A suggestion that I needed him. I called him right after I found it. "Did you come by today?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, tone light like it was no big thing. "You left your door unlocked again. I dropped off some stuff." "I didn't leave it unlocked." "You did, Dad." "No, I didn't," I snapped. He sighed the way people do when they think they're being patient with someone slow. "Look, I'm just trying to help." "It's my home, David. You don't just walk in." Another sigh. "You're overthinking things. Let's talk about this when you're calmer." Calmer, that word. Like I was a child throwing a tantrum. Like I wasn't lucid enough to know what was happening in my own house. But I let it go. We hung up without resolving a damn thing. And the truth is, part of me wondered if maybe he was right. Maybe I had left the door unlocked. Being old is like that. You can feel sharp as a tack on Monday and slow as molasses on Tuesday. Shame sits in your throat like a stone. A week later, it happened again. I'd been keeping track of my monthly expenses in a little spiral notebook. Nothing fancy, just dates, amounts, and the occasional note about a doctor bill. One morning, that notebook was gone. Not moved. Not misplaced. Gone. I tore apart the house looking for it, muttering to myself, getting angrier by the minute. When I finally found it, tucked neatly into my desk drawer with another sticky note that said, "Let me manage this for you. It's too much." I felt something inside me tilt. That wasn't help. That was control. Still, I said nothing. Because when your own son treats you like you're fading, it's easier to question yourself than him. But the crack widened fast. Later that month, I got a reminder from my doctor's office about a follow-up appointment I'd supposedly missed. I never missed doctor appointments. Not after I had that scare in 2018 with my blood pressure shooting up so high the nurse muttered "Jesus" under her breath. So I called the clinic on South Cedar. "Ma'am, I didn't miss anything," I told the receptionist. "I didn't even get a call." "Sir," she said gently, "we spoke with your son. He said you were having trouble keeping your schedule straight and asked us to contact him instead." I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. "He said what?" "That you wanted him to handle your reminders from now on." My voice shook, and not from age. "Ma'am, I never gave him permission for that." "I understand," she said, her tone shifting. "Do you want us to change it back?" "Yes," I said, "change it back today." "Of course, sir." Her voice was kind, pitying even. I hated it. When I hung up, I sat down hard in my recliner. It felt like the room had tilted, like time had slowed down in that sickening way it does right before a car crash. David wasn't just trying to help anymore. He was taking over quietly, systematically, like someone testing how much a door will budge before kicking it open. I waited until evening before calling him. "David," I said, trying to keep my voice level, "why did you tell the clinic I couldn't manage my own appointments?" His answer was immediate, practiced. "Dad, I didn't say you couldn't manage. I said you were struggling." "I never said that to you." "You don't remember." That was it. 4 words. A blade slipping between ribs. I didn't yell, I didn't plead. I just went silent. "Dad," he said after a moment, "you still there?" "I'm here. You need to trust me. I'm trying to protect you." I swallowed hard. My mouth tasted metallic. "From what?" I said quietly. He hesitated. "From losing everything." I didn't know what he meant at the time. I didn't understand the full scope of his plan. But his voice, God, his voice. It had the tone of someone who'd already decided something on my behalf, someone who thought the discussion was over. And that was the moment, the exact moment, I felt the first jolt of fear. You're not supposed to be afraid of your own child. You're not supposed to wonder what they're doing behind your back. You're not supposed to question whether they see you as a person or a liability. But that night, lying in bed while the house creaked like old bones around me, I stared at the ceiling and felt something I hadn't felt since the army. The sense that someone had me in their sights. 2 weeks later came the phone call that cracked everything wide open. It was a Friday morning, the kind where the Pacific Northwest mist hangs low enough to touch. I was sipping coffee when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Lawson," a man said. "This is Evan Phillips from Cascade Life Insurance. We're calling to confirm the beneficiary change request." My stomach dropped. "Beneficiary change? What beneficiary change?" "Your son submitted the paperwork. Durable POA, standard procedure." My hand went numb. "What did he change?" A pause. A quiet clearing of the throat. Then softly, "Everything, sir." My mug slipped from my hand and shattered across the floor, spraying hot coffee across my bare feet. I didn't even feel it. "Sir," the man said, "are you there?" But my mind was far away, inside a memory from 1983, the day Elaine and I signed our first life insurance policy after Michael was born. She de-joked about how boring adulthood was, and I'd kissed her forehead and told her boring was a blessing. Now here I was, 40 years later, alone in a quiet house, hearing that my own son had rewritten the story of my life without speaking a single word to me. And for the first time, not anger, not confusion, not humiliation, but something sharper, darker. Suspicion. Because this wasn't forgetfulness. This was help. This wasn't concern. This was a plan. And I, stupid, trusting old man that I was, had ignored every damn sign. But that was about to change. You know, a man can ignore a slow leak for a long time, patch it with wishful thinking, pretend the floorboards aren't warping, tell himself the house is sturdy, the foundation sound. But once the pipe bursts, once water comes pouring down into the living room, he can't lie to himself anymore. For me, that burst came on September 14th, 2021, at exactly 2:17 p.m. I remember the time because it burned itself into my mind like a hot brand. It was a Tuesday, the kind of mild Tacoma afternoon where the clouds hang low but don't quite commit to rain. I'd just gotten back from the VA clinic. I'd gone in for a blood pressure check after feeling dizzy the night before. Nothing unusual, the nurse said. "Just stress, Mr. Lawson. Try to rest." Rest, as if a man could rest knowing his son was quietly rearranging the bones of his life. When I got home, there was a thick envelope waiting on my front porch, addressed from Columbia Federal Credit Union. I assumed it was the corrected forms they'd promised to send me after I called them in a panic 2 weeks earlier. I set it on the kitchen table, poured myself a glass of cold tap water and sat down. The house felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I opened the envelope. Inside was a packet, 21 pages thick, legal language, signatures. Signatures that weren't mine. At first, I didn't understand what I was looking at. The words swam in front of my eyes. I had to blink several times before one line came into focus. Transfer of funds authorization, $86,274.16. To David Lawson. From James Lawson. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped the page. There was my signature. Except it wasn't mine. Not even close. The slant was wrong. The loop of the J was too big. My real signature dipped sharply to the right. I'd done it that way since basic training. This one curved up slightly at the end, like someone trying to remember how my hand moved without quite getting it right. I felt a buzzing in my ears, like a swarm of angry bees. My hands shook. The paper blurred. I turned the page. There it was again, another transfer. $14,800. Gone. Another. $9,500. Gone. Another. $3,900. Gone. It kept going page after page. By the time I reached the end, the total came to $114,474.16. My entire savings. My emergency fund. The money Elaine and I built over 40 years of scraped knuckles and double shifts. The money I'd planned to use if my health ever turned worse. Gone. All of it. I heard my own voice say, "No, no, no, no," like a chant, like I was trying to rewind time by sheer force of will. The kitchen started spinning. My breathing quickened. I grabbed the counter to steady myself. Then, I don't know why I did it, I looked again at that forged signature, stared at it until my vision sharpened, until the fear dimmed enough to make room for a colder thought. David didn't do this by accident. He planned this. Carefully. Deliberately. Cruelly. I sank into my kitchen chair, the vinyl cushion squeaking under me. The house creaked like it was listening. I don't know how long I sat there. Could have been 2 minutes. Could have been 20. My mind drifted between memories and disbelief. David at age 9, running through sprinklers in the backyard. David at 17, standing behind the wheel of my old F-150 with that proud smile. David at 30, placing my wife's hand gently on the casket before it closed. Now David forging my name. Stealing my life savings. Rewriting my future. The man I raised had taken everything I had left. When my phone rang, I nearly jumped out of my chair. It was an unknown number again. My voice cracked when I answered. "Hello, Mr. Lawson," a man said. "This is Jeffrey Price from Columbia Federal's Fraud and Compliance Department. I'm calling regarding the documents you requested copies of." The room tilted. "Requested? I didn't request anything," I whispered. A pause. Then a careful, professional tone. "Well, sir, someone using your power of attorney did." My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles turned white. "Who?" "Your son, David Lawson." I closed my eyes. "What did he tell you?" "He said you were struggling to keep up with your accounts and wanted oversight. He insisted the transfers were for your long-term care. We processed everything because the durable POA file was complete and notarized." Notarized? My throat tightened. "Sir," Jeffrey said quietly, "are you safe right now?" No bank employee had ever asked me that, not once in 76 years. But at that moment, those 6 words, they cut through everything. Through the humiliation, the disbelief, the fog of betrayal. And for the first time, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Rage. Pure, clean, bone-deep rage. I steadied my breath. "Mr. Price," I said, my voice low, "that signature is forged. I didn't authorize a damn thing, and my son, my own son, is stealing from me." Another quiet pause, then he said, "I believe you." Those 3 words were the rope thrown to drowning man. "We need to meet," he continued, "in person, immediately, and you need to bring any identification and old signatures you can find. If this is fraud, we have procedures." "Procedures," I repeated, voice shaking. "He has stolen my life." "I'm going to help you," he said, "but you need to come in today." I hung up, heart pounding so hard I felt it in my jaw. For a long moment I just sat there, staring at the papers spread across my table like a crime scene. Then I stood up slowly, painfully, and walked to the hallway closet. I pulled out a box of old documents, the ones Elaine used to nag me to organize. Medical forms, tax returns, birthday cards, and yes, old signatures, years of them. I laid them out beside the forged ones. Side by side. Truth against lie. My hand against his. And that was when the real shattering happened, not from the theft, not from the legal trickery, but from one thought that struck me with the force of a hammer. My son believed I was already gone. He thought I was too old to notice, too weak to fight, too broken to matter. But he was wrong. God help him, he was wrong. I didn't fall apart all at once. Men like me, old Union men, Army men, men who fixed their own roofs and buried the love of their lives without collapsing, we don't crumble in a single blow. We erode, piece by piece, quietly, almost politely. The days after discovering the forged documents were some of the darkest I've ever lived. And I don't say that lightly. I've seen dark days. I was 22 and 68, sitting in a muddy field halfway around the world, listening to mortars in the distance and wondering which sunrise would be my last. But this was different. War takes strangers, life takes time, but your own son. Your own flesh and blood. That takes something deeper. The morning after I met with Jeffrey Price at Columbia Federal, I woke before dawn, lungs tight, sweat cold on my back. The house was pitch black except for the faint glow of the street lamp bleeding through the blinds. I sat there on the edge of my bed, elbows on my knees, staring at my hands. They looked old. Too old. Veins raised, knuckles swollen, skin loose. I whispered, "What the hell happened to us, Elaine?" into that dark room. My wife had been gone almost 11 years, but grief doesn't leave. It just settles deeper in the bones. And now, this betrayal, it made me miss her in a way that felt like drowning. She would have known something was wrong with David. She would have seen what I refused to see. Around 6:15 a.m., I forced myself out of bed, joints cracking like dry twigs. I shuffled into the kitchen and made coffee, though the smell turned my stomach. The papers, those damn papers, were still spread across the table where I'd left them the night before. Forged signatures, transfer sheets, copies of documents I didn't remember signing because I hadn't signed them. Seeing them all again, I couldn't breathe. It was like staring at a car crash you caused by trusting the wrong person. I pushed them aside and opened the fridge. Nothing looked appetizing. I grabbed a slice of cold pizza from the night before and took one bite before throwing it away. It tasted like cardboard, like shame. I didn't leave the house that entire day. Didn't turn on the TV. Didn't answer calls, not even from Michael, my other son, who'd left 2 voicemails saying, "Hey Dad, everything okay? Call me when you can." Even Leonard from the Veterans Hall called once. "Jimmy," he said on the voicemail, voice gravelly as always, "you're usually the first guy here on Cribbage Tuesday. You sick or something?" I deleted the message without answering. Couldn't bear to hear my own voice lie to my oldest friend. On the 3rd day, I made a mistake. A big one. I answered David's call. He started off sweet like honey covering poison. "Dad, I'm worried. You haven't answered my texts." I stared at the wall. "I know what you did." A pause. A long one. Then, "I don't know what you think you saw." "Don't," I snapped, my voice cracked. "Don't lie to me in my own damn house." He shifted tones instantly, from soothing to controlled, clipped. "Dad, you're confused. You've been under a lot of stress lately." Stress, my hand tightened around the phone. "You stole my money, you forged my name." "I took control," he said calmly, "because you needed help." I felt the floor tilt under me like the house was tipping. "Needed help? David, you wiped out my entire savings." "I moved funds to protect them," he said, his voice steady, too steady. "If someone tried to take advantage of you, the only person taking advantage of me is you." Silence. A sharp inhale. Then coldly, "If you keep this up, Dad, I'm going to have to make some decisions for your safety." My blood ran cold. What's that supposed to mean? "It means," he said softly, "if you can't manage your affairs, I'll have to intervene. Legally." Legally. The word hit me like a brick to the teeth. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. A line drawn in the sand. I hung up before he could say anything else. My legs buckled, and I slid down the wall to the floor. I pressed the heel of my hand into my eyes until stars burst behind my lids. Was he planning to have me declared incompetent? Was that the end game? Take control of everything. My house. My accounts. My life. The thought made the room spin. That afternoon, I drove to the waterfront, down by Ruston Way, parked facing Commencement Bay, and sat there for over an hour watching the gulls skim the water. I saw a father carrying his toddler daughter on his shoulders, pointing at the boats. I remember thinking, at what point does love twist into something unrecognizable? When I finally started the truck again, the engine felt louder than usual. My heart thudded in my chest. I felt small in a way I hadn't since I was a kid standing in front of my father after breaking his favorite fishing rod. By the time I got home, the mailbox was full 2 bills, 1 grocery flyer, and 1 letter that made my blood run cold. A notice from Washington State Adult Protective Services. "We have received a report concerning your well-being." I read the rest with shaking hands. Someone had contacted them. Claimed I was in cognitive decline. Claimed I was making unsafe decisions. Claimed I needed intervention. And the kicker, the part that sealed it. Reporter David Lawson. My own son had reported me. Filed paperwork behind my back. Put me on the radar of a state agency that could take control of everything. My knees gave out. I dropped the letter. The room tilted and swayed like I was on a ship in rough waters. I grabbed the edge of the kitchen counter to keep from falling completely. It hit me all at once. He wasn't stealing my money. He was stealing my autonomy, my adulthood, my personhood. He was building a case, a narrative, a paper trail, one that said, "Dad can't take care of himself." And if he succeeded, if APS believed even half of what he said, I'd lose more than my savings. I'd lose my freedom. That night, sitting alone in my dimly lit kitchen with the envelope from APS lying like a loaded gun on the table, I realized something. I wasn't just being robbed. I was being erased. And for the first time since the whole nightmare began, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope. Not strength. Resolve. A hard, cold resolve that rose from somewhere deep, deeper than rage, deeper than fear. Something forged from every year I'd survived, every loss I'd endured. If David wanted a war, he'd get one. He thought I was slipping. He thought he could smother me with paperwork. He thought age made me helpless. But he forgot one thing. I'd lived long enough to know how to fight quiet battles. The kind you don't see coming. The kind fought in shadows, with patience, with grit. And this time, I wasn't going to lose. You ever hear that old saying, "A man alone is half a man"? I never believed it until the night my world cracked open. Until I realized David wasn't acting alone, not in intention, not in execution. He had the systems on his side, the banks, the POA documents, the state agencies. He had youth. He had confidence. He had every advantage a 76-year-old man like me wasn't supposed to have anymore. But the thing about men my age, we've lived long enough to know how to find allies in the unlikeliest places. And it started with a woman named Rosa Martinez. 2 days after the APS letter arrived, I found myself sitting in the waiting room at the VA clinic on South Cedar. I wasn't even there for an appointment. Hell, I didn't know why I drove there at all. I guess I just felt safer in a building filled with people who understood broken things, broken bodies, broken minds, broken families. I sat hunched in a plastic chair, staring at the vending machine across from me. The metal hum of the fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. A nurse walked by, then another. My heart felt like it weighed 100 pounds. That's when I heard her voice. "Mr. Lawson, you okay?" I looked up and saw Rosa for the first time. Dark hair pulled into a bun, navy scrubs, badge clipped to her shirt with a little plastic angel dangling from it. She'd taken my vitals during my last visit, but we'd barely spoken then. "I'm fine," I lied. She raised an eyebrow. "You're sitting here without an appointment, and you look like someone ran over your dog twice." Against my will, I huffed out a laugh. "It's been a week." She sat down in the empty chair beside me like she had all the time in the world. "Tell me." Normally, I don't spill my problems to strangers. I barely told my kids when I had prostate surgery back in 2012. But something about her, maybe the steadiness in her eyes, made the words spill before I could stop them. "My son," I started, trying to swallow the tightness in my throat. "He stole from me, lied to the bank, filed things I didn't sign, and now he's trying to make the state think I'm losing my mind." She didn't laugh, didn't pity me. She just listened. When I finished, she blew a slow breath through her teeth. "I see cases like this more than you'd think." Her words hit me like a jolt. I'd spent the past few weeks thinking this kind of betrayal was unique, some personal curse. But she spoke with the tired authority of someone who had watched sons, daughters, nieces, nephews do the exact same thing to people just like me. "Mr. Lawson," she said, leaning closer, "you're being targeted, not declining." I swallowed hard. "APS thinks I might be." "APS gets reports all the time, some legit, most not." She looked around, then lowered her voice. "They'll investigate, but if you want to protect yourself, you need documentation, evidence, dates, conversations, paper trails." The word evidence snagged something deep inside me. "I have some papers," I said. "Forged signatures, transfer records." "That's a start." She tapped her badge. "But you need more." I shifted in my chair. "Like what?" "Proof that you're competent, records of you managing your life, phone logs, written notes, anything that shows you're functioning independently." I stared down at my hands. "I don't know where to begin." She looked at me for a long moment before saying something that changed everything. "You're not doing this alone." The next day, Rosa came by my house after her shift. She brought a stack of blank notebooks, a box of ballpoint pens, and a thermos of strong coffee. She set everything on my kitchen table like a general preparing for battle. "First thing," she said, flipping open a notebook, "we document everything, dates, times, what he said, what you said, every withdrawal, every letter." Her voice had steel in it. I nodded, my throat thick. "I remember most of it." "Good," she clicked her pen. "You're going to write it down, all of it." So I did. For hours. I wrote until my fingers cramped, until my handwriting turned shaky. I wrote through the late afternoon light slanting across the table, through the scent of her coffee filling the kitchen. And with each page, something strange happened. My mind sharpened. The fog lifted. All the shame that had been strangling me began to loosen. When I finished, Rosa gathered the pages, smoothed them into a neat stack, and slid them into a manila folder. "This," she said, tapping the folder, "is your timeline. It will be our foundation." "Our?" "You heard me." I blinked. "Why are you helping me?" She hesitated before saying, "My grandmother went through something similar. My uncle drained her accounts. Everyone said she was confused. She was alone." Her jaw tightened. "I won't let that happen to someone else." I felt my eyes sting, and I looked away. "Thank you," I whispered. She patted my hand. "We're just getting started." 2 days later, ally number 2 appeared. His name was Zach Turner, though most folks at the Veterans Hall just called him Computer Kid. He was 52, practically an infant compared to me, with a shaved head, thick glasses, and the kind of energy that made you think he'd had caffeine injected directly into his bloodstream. He fixed laptops for half the guys at the hall, including me once when my email mysteriously stopped working. Turns out I'd forgotten my password. I found him sitting on a bench outside the hall, sipping a Mountain Dew. When I told him what happened, he let out a low whistle. "Damn, Jim, that's messed up. That's one word for it." He scratched his chin. "What do you need?" "I need proof," I said. "Digital proof, anything that shows what my son's done." He nodded slowly. Okay, I can look into things, devices, email logs, cloud backups, maybe even metadata on scanned documents. I don't know what half of that means. That's okay, he grinned. I do. 3 hours later, he was in my living room, crouched in front of my old HP Pavilion desktop like a surgeon over an open chest cavity. He plugged in a portable hard drive, typed like a man possessed, and muttered things under his breath like, "Yep, okay, timestamps don't lie." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said without looking up, "if your son submitted any scanned document from his own device, I can trace where and when it was created." My heart thumped, even if he forged the signature. Especially then. I sat down hard in my recliner. Hope, real hope, thrummed through me for the first time in weeks. Zach worked past midnight. He ordered himself a pizza and insisted I eat 2 slices. At one point, he held up a page on my screen. "Look," he said. "What am I looking at?" A digital breadcrumb. The POA document was scanned at 11:42 a.m. on July 2nd. Guess whose Google account was logged in at that exact minute? Whose? He turned the screen toward me. David Lawson. Gmail address. Recent device, Samsung Galaxy S21. I stared at it until the edges blurred. "We'll keep digging," he said softly. By the end of that week, I had 3 things I didn't have before. A detailed written timeline. Digital evidence tying the forged forms to David's devices. 2 people who believed me. But the third ally came by accident. Her name was Margaret Chen, attorney at law. I met her because Rosa made the call without telling me. I answered my phone one evening to a brisk voice saying, "Mr. Lawson, this is Margaret Chen. Rosa Martinez gave me your number. She tells me you're in trouble." My eyebrows shot up. "She did she?" "Mr. Lawson, if what she told me is accurate, you're dealing with elder financial exploitation. It is criminal, and it is prosecutable." I swallowed hard. "He's my son." "Criminals don't stop being criminals because they're related to you," she said. "Do you want help or not?" I closed my eyes. "Yes." "Good. I'll be at your house at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Do not speak to your son before then." She hung up. I stared at the phone like it had bitten me. Rosa, Zach, Margaret. A nurse. A computer tech. An attorney. 3 people orbiting my collapsing little universe. 3 people who didn't see an old man losing his grip. 3 people who saw a man under attack. And with their help, something inside me shifted again. I'd spent weeks drowning in humiliation, fear, shame. But now, I felt my spine straighten. Felt breath fill my chest again. Felt a spark of the man I used to be. I wasn't done. I wasn't finished. And David had no idea what was coming. If Part 6 was about gathering allies, Part 7 was about sharpening weapons. Quiet weapons, paper, proof, timing, and the one thing a man my age still has over the younger generation: patience. When Margaret Chen showed up at my house the next morning, I expected a stiff, formal attorney with a briefcase and a tight smile. What I got was a 5'2" woman in a navy blazer, black Converse sneakers, and an attitude sharp enough to cut rope. She walked into my kitchen like she owned the place. "Show me everything," she said, not bothering with small talk. I laid out the forged POA, the transfer documents, the APS letter, the notes I'd written with Rosa's help, and Zach's digital printouts. She didn't sit. She paced. She skimmed. She grunted now and then. And when she finally spoke, her voice was ice cold and perfectly controlled. "Your son is building a false incompetency case against you. APS report, POA misuse, financial redirection. He's setting you up to lose your home and be placed under guardianship." I felt my stomach twist. Hearing it said out loud, plain and clinical, was like someone driving a nail through my ribs. "Guardianship," I whispered. She looked me dead in the eye. "If he gets it, you lose everything, permanently. He'd control your medical decisions, your accounts, your assets, even where you live." I swallowed hard. "Can he do that?" He can try, and from what I'm seeing, he already is. My hands began to shake. She noticed. She pulled out a small pack of tissues from her bag and pushed it toward me. I'm going to be blunt, Mr. Lawson. If we're going to stop him, you need to do exactly what I say. I will, I said quietly. She nodded once. Good, because from this moment forward, you're not reacting, you're acting. The first step of the setup was documentation. Real, official documentation, medical, legal, and personal. APS will investigate, she said. They'll interview you. They'll interview your son. They'll check your home. They'll check your behavior. We need to prepare for that. Prepare how? I asked. With truth, she said, and with control. The second step was clarity. You need a medical competency evaluation, she said. A full cognitive assessment from a licensed professional. Why? Because APS will question your capability. David is banking on them, thinking you're confused. We're going to show them you're not. A test, I murmured. A test you'll pass, she said firmly. You're sharp, I can tell. I don't know why, but hearing that, you're sharp, nearly broke me. After weeks of being told I was slipping, fading, losing myself, those two words felt like oxygen. The third step was the hardest. You need to start recording conversations with your son. I stiffened. Record him. Yes, Washington is a two-party consent state, normally, but there are exceptions when it comes to preventing a crime against a vulnerable adult. I winced. I'm not vulnerable. You're being targeted, she corrected, and the law knows the difference. She pulled a small digital recorder from her bag. Keep this on you at all times. Start noting dates, times, and contents of every interaction. I don't know if he'll call. Oh, he will, she said. People like your son always check on their lies. Later that afternoon, after Margaret left, I sat alone at the kitchen table. The house felt different now. Not empty, not haunted, more like a war room, quiet before a fight. I looked at the digital recorder, small, innocent-looking, strange that such a tiny object could be a shield. Around 5:30 p.m., right as the light was fading and the street lamps blinked alive, my phone buzzed. David. My heart thudded. I hesitated for just a second before sliding my thumb across the screen and pressing the button on the recorder. Dad, why haven't you called me back? His voice was syrupy sweet, the tone abusers use when they think you're still under their thumb. I've been busy, I said. Busy with what? A few things. A beat of silence, then he slipped just a little. You didn't call anyone, did you? I swallowed. Why would I do that? He exhaled sharply through the line. Dad, you know you're not thinking straight lately. You're forgetting things, making mistakes. If you talk to the wrong people, they won't understand. I'm fine, I said quietly. No, he said, voice rising, you're not. And if you don't start cooperating, I'm going to have to step in. I talked to APS. They can help if you won't let me. My blood turned cold. He said it out loud. Directly. Clearly. On tape. I felt Rose's words echo in my mind. You need documentation. I felt Margaret's command, record everything. I felt Zach's promise, timestamps don't lie. David kept talking, rambling on about how I needed help, how he was just trying to protect me, how I wasn't acting like myself. At the end of the call, I said just one thing. David, why are you doing this? He paused, then he said something I'll never forget. Because if I don't control your future, someone else will. The phone went silent. The recording stopped. My whole body shook. Not with fear this time. With clarity. He didn't see me as a person anymore. He saw me as a problem. A burden. An asset to be transferred, managed, contained. But now I had him. His words. His threats. His intent caught on tape. When Margaret returned the next morning and I played the recording for her, she didn't smile. She didn't gasp. She just nodded, slow, deliberate. That, she said, is the beginning of the end for him. I looked down at the little recorder in my hand. And now, I asked. She straightened her blazer. "Now, Mr. Lawson, we set the trap. You're going to let your son think he's winning." My pulse quickened. "Let him." "Yes," she said, her eyes sharp as needles, "because predators make mistakes when they feel safe." She leaned across the table. "And your son is about to get very, very comfortable." I nodded slowly. For the first time since this nightmare began. I wasn't afraid. I was ready. Margaret told me something that stuck in my ribs like a splinter. The moment he thinks you've stopped fighting is the moment he'll expose himself. So part 8 wasn't fireworks. It wasn't shouting. It wasn't some triumphant confrontation. It was quiet, calculated, slow as a fuse burning toward dynamite. And it started with me pretending to be exactly what David desperately needed me to be. Helpless. The first move Margaret made was deceptively simple. "You're going to call your son," she said, "and you're going to sound defeated." "Defeated," I repeated. "Yes, you're going to let him believe the APS letter scared you into submission. You're going to tell him you're overwhelmed, confused, tired. You're going to give him the illusion of victory." I stared at her. "That'll kill me." She leaned forward. "It'll save you." And so, with my fingers trembling slightly, I dialed David's number. He answered on the second ring. "Dad." My voice came out small. God, it disgusted me to make it so. "David, I think you're right." A long, cautious silence. "About what?" "About me, about everything." I forced a weak exhale. "I think I do need help." He swallowed. I heard it through the phone. "Dad, you don't have to be ashamed. That's why I stepped in." "I know," I whispered. "I know. I'm sorry for being difficult." He softened immediately, just like Margaret predicted. "It's okay, Dad. I'm here. I'll take care of things." I felt bile rise in my throat. "Could you come by, maybe go over some paperwork? I think I mixed up some bills." "Of course," he said. "I'll be there tomorrow." When I hung up, I set the phone down like it was something dirty. Margaret didn't comfort me. She simply said, "Good, now we prepare." The second move was environmental. Rosa spent the next morning walking through my home with me, making sure everything was in order. "APS might show up unannounced," she said. "They'll look for signs of neglect, confusion, safety hazards." She checked my fridge, pantry, medication organizer, mail pile, smoke detector batteries. "You pass every test," she said with a firm nod. "Better than half the 40-year-olds I work with." For the first time in weeks, I felt a little taller. The third move was digital. Zach returned to my house that evening, carrying something that looked like a black USB stick and a small device with a blinking green light. "Audio splitter," he said. "This'll route calls through a backup recorder, just in case you forget to hit the button on the pocket one." I raised an eyebrow. "How much did this cost you?" He shrugged. "Don't worry about it." "I'm serious." He sighed. "A cheeseburger from Frisco Freeze and a milkshake, vanilla." I laughed so hard I nearly choked. He installed everything quietly, efficiently. When he was done, he tapped the side of my computer tower. "You've got redundancies now. If he calls, we catch it. If he emails, we capture it. If he tries to log into your accounts again, we track it." I exhaled. "You're something else, kid." He gave me a shy smile. "Just helping a friend." The fourth move was bait. Margaret told me exactly what to do. "When he comes tomorrow, you're going to show him a stack of fake, confused paperwork, bills in the wrong envelopes, notes scribbled poorly, a few mistakes, believable mistakes. You're going to let him think he's tightening the noose." My chest tightened. "Won't that make him escalate?" "That's exactly what we need," she said. And then the day came. October 3rd, 2021, 1:12 p.m. The doorbell rang. I felt every muscle in my body tense. Sweat prickled the back of my neck. Rosa sat silently in the living room behind a cracked door out of sight. Margaret, under the guise of a friend from church, sat at the dining table with a cup of coffee, reading a pamphlet. Zach remained parked 2 houses down in his Subaru, laptop open, ready to track any digital movement. I shuffled to the door slowly, deliberately. Pretending. I opened it. David stood there, clean-shaven, polo shirt, sympathetic smile. "Hey, Dad." I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked inside like he owned the place. His eyes scanned the room, lingering on the messy stack of papers on the kitchen counter. "What's all this?" he asked, voice full of practiced concern. I rubbed the back of my neck. "I tried organizing things. Guess I made a mess of it." He grinned gently. "It's okay, that's why I'm here." He approached the table, picking up a bill and shaking his head. "Dad, this is the electric bill. You put it in an envelope for your doctor's office." "Did I?" "Yes," he sighed dramatically. "Look, Dad, this is exactly what I meant." I lowered my head. "I know." Inside my pocket, the recorder was rolling. He picked up another sheet. "And this is a grocery list inside your tax folder. Dad, this isn't normal forgetfulness." I let my voice crack. "I'm trying." His smile widened just a hair. He was enjoying this. Enjoying my shame. Enjoying the control. Then he said the line that sealed his fate. "This is why I had to take over your accounts. I couldn't risk you making bad decisions." I kept my voice low, quivering. "You forged my name." "No," he said firmly. "I authorized what you couldn't handle. There's a difference." My stomach flipped. He reached into his bag and pulled out new papers. "What's that?" I asked. "A guardianship petition," he said calmly. "It's just a draft, but if things keep going this way—" My heart slammed against my ribs. He had no idea he was burying himself. I let my shoulders sag. Maybe that's for the best." He placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'll take care of you, Dad." That was the moment Rosa quietly clicked a photo through the cracked door. His hand on me, his bag open, the guardianship papers in clear view. And that was the moment Zach texted me from outside. "He's logging into your bank again." Got him. Everything is time-stamped. But the final moment, the one Margaret was waiting for, came when David leaned in slightly and whispered, "Just sign what I give you. Don't make this harder than it has to be." I didn't react. I didn't flinch. I just let him talk. He picked up a pen. "Here," he said softly, "let me help you sign." And that was it. The spark. The slip. The criminal act caught on 3 recordings, a photograph and Zach's digital logs. All while thinking he'd already won. I watched him smile. Confident. Assured. Certain he had me backed into a corner. He had no idea the corner he'd backed me into had a trapdoor. They say a person's downfall doesn't come all at once. It arrives in layers, like paint peeling off an old house. I'd seen it in war, in marriage, in men who used to swagger into the VFW hall and ended up whispering regrets into their last beers. But I'd never seen it in my own blood. Never thought I would. Until the day everything David built, every lie, every forgery, every smug little manipulation, started coming apart faster than he could patch it. It began the morning after his guardianship talk, when Margaret showed up at my house at 8:03 a.m. sharp, holding a folder so thick it looked like it had vitamin deficiency. "Time to report this," she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite her. "And time to protect you legally." My heart thudded. To who? She tapped the folder with her fingernail. "APS, the bank in Pierce County Court. You're not hiding anymore, he is." The APS interview. The APS investigator, a woman named Corinne Douglas, arrived 2 days later. Mid-40s, navy jacket, hair pulled back tight. Professional. Neutral. Trained to detect confusion, fear, manipulation, cognitive decline. I was nervous. More nervous than I'd been since the Army issued my first rifle. But Rosa sat beside me on the couch, hands folded neatly in her lap, and Margaret positioned herself at the dining table taking notes like she was preparing to depose God himself. Corinne opened her binder. "Mr. Lawson, thank you for meeting with me. I understand you've been reported for concerns regarding your safety and mental status." I nodded. Yes, ma'am, by my son. Her eyebrows lifted just slightly. And do you agree with his concerns? No, I said, and I have evidence. Margaret slid the packet toward her, neat, labeled, time-stamped. The forged signatures. The unauthorized transfers. The APS letter. The screenshots Zach recovered. The audio transcripts, including the one where David said, "If you don't start cooperating, I'll have to step in legally." Corinne read silently for a long while. Her lips tightened, her jaw flexed. She turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, this is very serious." I swallowed, I know. She glanced at Rosa. "You've witnessed his daily functioning." "Yes," Rosa said calmly. "He's independent, organized, and cognitively intact. His son's claims are unfounded." Then she turned to Margaret. "You're his attorney." "Correct, and we're filing formal allegations of POA abuse, financial exploitation, and coercion." Corinne took a long breath and closed her folder. "Mr. Lawson, based on what I've seen and heard here today," she said slowly, "you do not meet criteria for vulnerability or cognitive impairment. Your son's report appears to be knowingly misleading." Knowingly misleading. Those words hit me like a breath of fresh air straight into my lungs. She continued, "Effective immediately, APS suspends any action related to your son's claims, and I will be initiating an internal review regarding him. His behavior raises serious red flags." I expected relief, maybe gratitude, but instead, what washed through me was exhaustion so heavy I felt myself sink back into the couch. Corinne closed her bag and stood. "Mr. Lawson, you are not the problem here, he is." I nodded, barely able to speak. "Thank you." She left, the room was silent. Then Rosa reached over and squeezed my hand. "You did good," she said softly. "But it didn't feel like victory." "Not yet. This was just the first crack." The bank's turn. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a small conference room at Columbia Federal Credit Union. It smelled like copier toner and burnt coffee. Jeffrey Price, the fraud investigator, sat across from me, tapping a pen against a thick folder. "Mr. Lawson," he began, "I've reviewed everything you gave us. I've compared your legitimate signatures to the ones on file for the POA and transfers. They don't match." I nodded. "And we've analyzed the metadata. All the documents were submitted from your son's device, without your presence, without verification." Something hot burned behind my eyes. "So what happens now?" He leaned forward. "The bank is reversing the transfers, every dollar." My breath caught. "All of it?" "Yes," he said. "Every penny taken from your accounts through fraudulent authorization will be restored." I closed my eyes. I didn't realize until that moment how tightly I'd been holding myself together. Relief flooded me so fast my chest hurt with it. Jeffrey wasn't done. "There's more," he said. "We've frozen your son's access, revoked the POA, flagged the account, and we're referring the matter to the county prosecutor." My eyes snapped open. "The prosecutor?" His voice softened. "Mr. Lawson, this is felony-level exploitation." I swallowed hard. The room felt too small, too bright. "We'll handle the financial side," he continued. "Your attorney and APS will handle the rest." When I walked out of that bank, the autumn air felt sharper, clearer, like the world had finally come back into focus after months underwater. But the biggest unraveling hadn't happened yet. The first phone call from David. That evening my phone buzzed. "Him? Dad, what the hell is going on with the bank?" I clicked record. "What do you mean?" "They froze my access." "Your access to my accounts," I corrected calmly. His breath hitched. The panic he'd tried so hard to hide finally cracked through the surface. "Dad, listen, I don't know who you talked to, but—" "I talked to APS," I said, "and the bank and an attorney." A long, terrible silence. Then, "Why would you do this to me?" he whispered. Something inside me snapped clean in two. "Do this to you?" I was trying to help. "You stole from me," I said, voice rising. You forged my name. You tried to get guardianship. You tried to take my house. I breathed hard. You painted me as an invalid to agencies that could have taken my freedom. His voice cracked. Dad, don't do this. They'll come after me. You came after me. I let that hang in the air. He started crying, actual crying. I listened, feeling nothing but a hollow ache where love used to be. Finally, he whispered, Dad, please don't ruin my life. I closed my eyes. You ruined your own. Then I hung up. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I didn't feel weak. I didn't feel confused. I didn't feel old. I felt like a man standing up again after being on his knees too damn long. The breaking point. 2 mornings later, Margaret arrived at my house with a new packet. She laid it on the table. What's this? I asked. Pierce County filed charges, she said. Your son is being summoned for questioning. I stared at the papers, at the seal, at the weight of it. My voice was barely a whisper. It's really happening then. Yes, she said, it's happening. She sat down across from me. Her expression softened in a way I hadn't seen before. How are you feeling? How was I feeling? How do you answer a question like that when the person who used to call you dad was now facing the consequences of betraying everything you'd built? I didn't cry. Men my age don't cry easily. But my voice shook when I said, I never wanted this. Margaret nodded, I know. And I loved him. I know. And I still do, I whispered. She didn't pat my hand. She didn't offer false comfort. She just said the only true thing there was to say. Love doesn't excuse what he did. I exhaled. Slow, long, heavy, and then I asked, so what now? Margaret opened her folder. Now, she said, we prepare for court. And that was when I realized the unraveling wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the reckoning. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing, not a wink. I sat in my recliner with the TV off, house dark except for the soft amber glow from the little lamp Elaine bought back in '92 at a yard sale on South J Street. I kept turning that lamp on and off, like I was trying to signal a ship in the fog. You'd think at 76, a man would have lived long enough to know what to expect from the world. But nothing prepares you for walking into a courtroom to face your own son, not as family, but as an accuser and the accused. I wore my best shirt, blue, the one Elaine always said made my eyes look kinder. I shaved slow, carefully, hands steady for the first time in weeks. When I buttoned my collar, I caught myself breathing in deep, like I was suiting up for deployment again. By 8:10 a.m., I was sitting in a wooden bench inside the Pierce County courthouse. The place smelled like old paper and floor polish. A security guard nodded at me as he walked past, older guy my age. He gave me that look men sometimes give each other when words would be too heavy. Margaret arrived a minute later in her navy blazer and Converse sneakers. She handed me a warm cup of coffee. Drink, she ordered. I took a sip. My hands barely shook at all. David came in 10 minutes before the hearing. He looked thinner than I remembered, hair messier, eyes bloodshot. His wife wasn't with him, couldn't tell if she'd left or refused to be involved. He glanced around the room before seeing me. Our eyes met. I wish I could tell you I felt anger or triumph or some righteous thunder in my chest, but I didn't. I felt grief, slow and heavy as wet cement. He walked over, shoulders hunched. Dad, he said quietly. I didn't answer. Not because I hated him, God, no. But because I knew any word I spoke in that moment would break something inside me I'd never be able to repair. He tried again. Dad, can we? Margaret stepped between us like a wall. Not today. He stepped back, and for the first time since this nightmare began, he looked afraid. Not of me. Of what he'd done. The hearing was short, efficient, cold in the way the law has to be. Judge Brenner, older woman, silver hair, steel eyes, took her place and began reviewing the documents. Every page, every signature, every timestamp Zach uncovered, every transcript, every recording. When she pressed the button and played the audio, David's voice saying, "If you don't start cooperating, I'll have to step in legally," the entire room went still. My son lowered his head. Didn't try to deny it. Didn't try to blame me. Didn't say a single word. His attorney asked to approach the bench. The judge denied it. "This is exploitation," Judge Brenner said plainly. "Calculated, sustained, and deeply troubling." My throat tightened. She turned to me. "Mr. Lawson, your accounts will be fully restored. Your power of attorney has been revoked. A protective order is being put in place preventing your son from accessing any of your financial, medical, or legal records." I nodded slowly. "Thank you, Your Honor." Then she turned to David. "Mr. Lawson, you are facing formal charges. You may speak if you wish." He looked at me first, eyes wet, broken, searching for something, mercy maybe, forgiveness, maybe the father he'd buried under greed and fear. "Dad," he whispered, "I'm so sorry." The courtroom blurred around me. For a second, all I saw was the boy he used to be, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest during Seahawks games, the one who cried when he lost his first tooth, the one who hugged Elaine's leg the first day of kindergarten because he didn't want to let go. But that boy was gone, and the man standing before me had made his own choices. When I didn't respond, he wiped his face with the back of his hand. His voice cracked. I didn't think you'd fight me." It hit me so hard I felt it in my ribs. He didn't think I'd fight. He didn't think I could. The judge spoke again. "This court finds sufficient evidence to proceed with criminal charges." David nodded, accepting, resigned, broken in a way I never wanted to see. Then he was led out of the room. And just like that, the son I knew and the father I had been to him dissolved into something I don't think either of us will ever fully understand. After the hearing, Margaret and Zach and Rosa took me to a diner off 6th Avenue, a place with sticky menus and red vinyl booths. The waitress called me sweetheart and kept refilling my coffee. Margaret went over next steps, monitoring, account restrictions, long-term protections. I heard her, but I was elsewhere, staring out the window at a father holding his toddler on the sidewalk. The little girl kept pulling at her dad's beard, slapping his cheeks while he laughed. Something deep in my chest twisted. Rosa reached across the table and touched my hand. "Jim," she said softly, "you did what you had to." I nodded barely. But the truth, the real truth. I didn't feel victorious. Didn't feel vindicated. Didn't even feel safe. I felt tired. Old. Like a man who just survived a storm by holding onto a single rusted nail in the side of a ship. And I felt something else too, something I wasn't ready to admit until now. Loss. I didn't just lose money. I didn't just lose trust. I lost the illusion that my son would always see me as his father, not an opportunity. That's a wound no court ruling fixes. It's been months now. The house is quiet. My accounts are back. APS closed the case. The prosecutor is doing whatever prosecutors do. Margaret still checks in. So does Rosa. Even Zach stops by some evenings just to talk about movies or tinker with my computer. And David. He hasn't called. Some nights I sit in the living room and stare at that lamp Elaine bought in '92. I leave it on. Not because I'm afraid of the dark. No, I've made my peace with darker things. I leave it on because it reminds me of something I keep trying to hold on to. Not everything breaks. Not everything gets taken. Some things, small, warm things, stay lit no matter what storms come pounding on your door. I fought back. I won. But the victory is quiet and heavy, like a coat I never meant to wear. If you're expecting a clean ending, some neat ribbon tied around all of this, you won't get it from me. Real life doesn't tie ribbons. It leaves you with what you can carry, what you can rebuild, and what you have to learn to live without. And me. I'm still here. Still standing. Still turning that damn lamp on every night. Because even after everything my son did, I refuse to live in the dark.